Hey, good start to Saturday.
Oh,
Good start to the day.
to Saturday. How was your week, man?
Good, man, good. We had the chance to head back to America First Field on Wednesday and go work some Real Salt Lake at the stadium for the first time in like a year. So that's probably the highlight of my week. Good to be back, man. Good to be back in soccer season, having some fun and covering some soccer.
RSL, not off to the greatest start.
Yeah, football is not life right now. And that's okay.
Are they 0-3?
They've yet to win one.
Right.
They drew one.
Okay, that's right.
They drew one.
A 0-0 draw.
And they've lost two.
But hey, they scored their first goal of the season.
They did, which was it was good to see Forcer Jago get in there, score his first goal, but not enough as Real Salt Lake fall 2-1 at home, crash out of the Champions Cup. Another game today. I'll be there later with KSL Sports and the RSL show, so I'm looking forward to that.
Big one today. We'll see if they can get their first victory of the season. We'll see how that goes. As always, you can catch it here on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. What is it, a 6:30 pregame, 7:30 first kick?
It'll be 2:30 kick.
Oh, no, it's an early afternoon game. That's right.
Early afternoon game, 2:30 kick, 1:30 pre here on the KSL Sports Zone.
I was getting that mixed up with the hockey.
Yes.
Highlight of my week. I'll go with this, Alex. How about a life-changing experience?
Oh.
It was pretty crazy. I was walking around my backyard.
Did you almost die?
Kind of.
Oh.
No, not really.
Oh.
No, I was walking around my backyard, and there was this weird hole, and it looked almost like a burrow hole from like an animal or whatever.
Oh, no.
But it looked too neat and perfect, right?
Okay.
Like not something an animal would dig. So I went to investigate.
Uh-oh.
I got a shovel. I was poking around, and I felt something hard. And I pulled up the shovel, and there was a bone, like a dog pelvis.
Oh my God.
So I found whoever owned this house before me must have buried their family dog in the backyard, and I stumbled upon it.
Wow.
So that was crazy.
That does sound crazy.
But yeah, other than that, my week was fine.
How do you, I guess, did your dog start
No,
burrowing? Or?
No. So the hole, so it was weird because once I got into the ground, it was like hollow underneath. I don't know how else to describe it. So I'm thinking that it must have been like an air pocket that made the hole, or something like that. But no, thankfully my dog was not sniffing around, because if my dog dug into the ground and pulled up another dog's bone, I would be pretty shook.
Well, hey, that's a interesting discovery, man.
Yeah, it was weird. How do you feel about burying dogs in the backyard?
I don't know where else you'd bury them, I guess.
Really? I could see that. My thing is, like, I don't know. We don't plan on staying this house. Like, this is our first house, right?
Sure.
We're not going to be here forever.
Sure, and then when you move, obviously you have to leave it.
Right.
Leave your friend behind. But yeah.
I guess if you're going to bury it, you're right. Like, where else are you going to bury it? I would probably opt more towards, like, cremating it or something. I don't know.
When my dog died a couple years ago, my siblings wanted to taxidermy it and like stuff it,
hang it on the wall.
And and hang it on the wall. And I'm glad we didn't do that.
Oh, you didn't do it?
No, we didn't.
Okay,
do it.
good, good.
No, he's buried in the backyard.
Yeah, yeah. Hopefully that's not something that I have to make the decision on anytime soon. But anyways, let's move to something more joyful. The Jazz. How about this?
We're off to a sour start here.
This
on
could
Saturday.
be good or bad, depending on your outlook. But the Jazz beat the Minnesota Timberwolves last night, 117-116. Alex, how are we feeling about the Jazz picking up this win?
Honestly, Christian, I feel good about it. I know it's a tank season. I know you're supposed to not win these games. But ultimately, you have to, when taking on Minnesota and when looking at the Minnesota Timberwolves, you have to take into consideration that the Jazz own their pick. It would be in the best interest for the Jazz to beat the Timberwolves. Because if the Timberwolves fall deep enough, the Utah Jazz could have 2 lottery picks, man.
Yeah, so that's an interesting thing, right? Because this win gives the Jazz their 15th win of the season. Pulling up Tankathon right now, they are still the third worst record in the NBA at 15-44. They're just behind Charlotte. Charlotte is 14-44. Washington, of course, worst team in the NBA. Nobody's really going to catch them. 10-48 on the season. Meanwhile, the New Orleans Pelicans, who the Jazz play tomorrow night, are behind the Jazz. They're the fourth worst record in the NBA. They have 16 wins. So, depending on how tomorrow night goes, this win might not do a lot of damage to the Jazz as far as the Tankathon standings and such. But meanwhile, looking at the lottery, this loss did slide Minnesota into the 14th worst record in the NBA, which would put them in the lottery.
Exactly. And that's why this was a game that you probably wanted to win. Right now, the Jazz are in a good spot because they are in one of those three spots that allows them to have the best odds at getting the number one overall pick. But now, on top of that, you throw the Timberwolves, who have now slid into a lottery position, and that's good because, again, the chance is there. It's on the table. The Jazz could have 2 lottery picks this upcoming draft, and I think we've talked about it on the show, Christian. That's probably best case scenario for the Jazz. If the Timberwolves can fall deep enough to end up with a lottery, and then obviously the Jazz is currently still in that lottery position. If the Jazz finish top 3, where you have the highest percentage to possibly get that number one overall pick, and on top of that you add Minnesota also being a lottery, that's perfect situation. Best case scenario.
2 bites at the apple, right?
Exactly.
One of my favorite sayings that a GM has ever said, they compared the draft. It was an NFL GM, but he compared it to like throwing darts at a dartboard, right? You just want as many darts as you can have to try and hit that bullseye. If you only have one dart, you have one shot. But the more ammunition, the more darts that you have, the higher chance you have of hitting that, whether it's the number one pick or a couple top 5 picks, who knows, but I'm with you. It sucks to see the Jazz winning a couple games here recently, and you hope that they don't continue to worsen their odds at the top of the draft. But you're right. If Minnesota can stay underneath that lottery line for the remainder of the season, it's going to be tough. Sacramento, Phoenix, Orlando, Miami, Dallas, those are some of the teams all around them. So if you are hoping the Jazz get another lottery pick, those are the teams that you are going to be cheering for the rest of the season.
There are currently 2 teams with that potential to get 2 lottery draft picks. Obviously, the Jazz is one, and then the Spurs can also double dip because they owe Atlanta's pick. So the Spurs and the Jazz both have 2 darts to throw at that number one overall pick.
Spurs, by the way, we didn't have a lot of time to talk about this last week, but Victor Wembanyama obviously being out for the rest of the season. The Spurs have 24 wins, so they're not going to end up in the top 5. Top 5 worst records. But, of course, with the lottery, you never know how that could play out. But you're right. The Spurs right now, currently, if the season ended today, they would have the 9th and 10th pick due to owning Atlanta's pick. So, interesting that there could be multiple teams with 2 picks in the lottery. We'll see how that shakes out. By the way, if it was the 14th pick that conveyed to the Jazz from Minnesota, that would have a 0.5% chance of becoming the number one overall pick, a 2.4% chance of becoming a top 4 pick. But even though those chances are small, Alex, I mean, there's still a chance. It's still a chance. And you know what? This draft is pretty good, right? We all know that. So even if this pick falls 5th or 6th or even top 10, that's a top 10 pick, right? That's a good thing.
And you want, again, as you'd want to have both of those lottery picks. You want to have that chance to draft 2 top 10 guys. You want the chance, even if it's not the number one overall, if the Jazz can go and get 2 picks in the top 10, that's still a pretty good situation to be in. That's still a pretty good spot to be in. It may not be Cooper Flagg, it may not be the number one overall, but you still get 2 top 10 talents coming out of college. And that's
In a good draft, too.
In a good draft.
Everybody has known that this draft is good. People have known that for a while. It's not quite as loaded. Like, next year's draft is absolutely loaded. But this year's draft is a heck of a lot better than last year's draft.
You can go out and you can bring in multiple guys, multiple talents, and hopefully one of them can be that star you're looking for. And again, I think that's a very good spot for the Jazz to be in.
Checking in on this game last night, in case you missed it, the Jazz beat the Timberwolves 117-116 here in Salt Lake City. You may be wondering, how in the world did the Jazz beat the Timberwolves? Well, Anthony Edwards did not play. He is suspended. He picked up his 16th and 17th technical fouls of the season the other night versus the Lakers. So Anthony Edwards had to miss a game there. Rudy Gobert, I believe, did not play as well.
That's right.
So the Timberwolves really struggling right now.
They were a little bit shorthanded, and then obviously for on the Jazz side of things, John Collins returns to the lineup, Colin Sexton returns to the lineup, and so that's two guys who automatically give you a boost. John Collins, by the way, had an absolutely phenomenal night. And so good
game-winning block, right?
Game-winning block, and he had, I believe it was either a season high for him. And so
29 points.
29 points. Coming back into this one, I think the Jazz know, and the Jazz understand that they own that Minnesota pick, and so a win over them would benefit them a lot. John Collins returns, Colin Sexton returns. Good performances from those two guys. And you sneak away with a 1-point win. Good performances from the young guys, good performances from the Jazz, and that's probably the best thing you can ask for.
Colin Sexton, his first game back after missing some time with a sprained ankle. It was a pretty ugly ankle turn. It was a while ago now at this point.
Yeah, he's been out for a while.
Yeah, but he played on a minutes restriction last night. Colin only played 17 minutes, but he finished with 13 points, 5 of 11 shooting, 2 of 4 from deep. So really good performance from Colin Sexton on only 17 minutes of play. Will Hardy was joking around before the game saying that Colin Sexton was not happy about being on a minutes restriction, but they got to do what's best for him and his health.
100%. Hey, Christian, how do you feel about KJ Martin? The new guy coming in?
Yeah, he is bringing a lot of energy off of the bench and into the locker room, and it's not weird, but it's just, I mean, this is a guy who has been on the team for 2 weeks, and it feels like he is the perfect fit. These guys love him in the locker room. I was talking to Ben Anderson yesterday about this. Ben Anderson, our Jazz insider, obviously, for KSL Sports, and he's like, yeah, he just fits into the locker room in a way that you don't see that often from somebody acquired at the NBA trade deadline, because, you spend a half season together and everybody kind of has maybe cliques or whatever in the locker room, and there's already a sort of culture that's established. So it can be hard for this guy to come in mid-season and try and fit in, but apparently KJ Martin is fitting in really well. And then on the court, super athletic. He's got good size, a big body. He's been in the league for a few years, so he knows what to do. Last night, in 22 minutes, 5 of 5 shooting, 11 points. He also added 4 rebounds, a steal, and a block. Like, yeah, I'll take that from a rotation guy.
Absolutely. 11 points isn't going to necessarily stand out, but through the course of the 2 weeks that we've seen KJ Martin, I've liked what I've seen. It seems like the players like what they see, and you can probably throw him in that same category of Colin Sexton, of John Collins, of just a little bit older guys that have NBA experience, have been playing in the league for a second, and have come in and can come in and really contribute. I've liked what I've seen from KJ Martin. It ultimately is a good pickup for the Utah Jazz. I was very curious to see how he would be integrated, and so far I think he's done a phenomenal job.
Well, and how many times have we seen the Jazz do this, Alec? I mean, we talked about it at the trade deadline, trading away Drew Eubanks, and KJ Martin, they got him for basically free. They didn't have to give anything up. And whether he's a part of this roster long term, who knows? But if he's not, if he keeps up this level of play, that's valuable. And there are going to be teams out there who are interested in giving the Jazz something for KJ Martin, whether it's a couple of second-round picks or a first-round pick a few years out. If KJ Martin really continues to play well, who knows? But regardless, this is the mode that the Jazz are in, picking up these guys off the street and then flipping them for assets. And that's good process.
A little bit more of a quiet night for Walker Kessler, but I have to tip my hat off to Walker, man. The way that he's evolved from the slump we saw last year into what he's becoming today, it's absolutely phenomenal, man. I'm so happy with Walker and his development. Walker Kessler,
he's tough, man.
He's tough.
He's tough.
And we had Thurl Bailey come on JJ and Alex, and he talked about the evolution of the five, how much it's changed over the course of the last couple of years, and why Walker Kessler fits the new norm for centers. And Walker Kessler is the anchor. And I'm very happy to see him continue to develop and grow and have the performances that he's having, man. I absolutely love Walker Kessler.
What I like about Walker is he does it without being a shooter, right?
Yeah.
A couple years ago, everybody was like, oh, if you want to be a big in this league, you need to be able to shoot threes. And that's how it looked a couple of years ago. But all of a sudden, Walker Kessler, in this season that he's having, he's doing it kind of old school style. Like you mentioned, this is where centers are going in the league, which is true. But at the same time, like, he's just playing old school, tough basketball. He fights for rebounds. He fights for shots. He knows how to be physical, how to use his big 7-foot body and say, I'm bigger than you and I'm stronger than you, and you're not going to out-physical me. And I think your center having that attitude is perfect, especially for a team like the Jazz, right? They're never going to get the biggest names, the biggest stars. They need to kind of have a reputation of being tough and gritty, and I think Walker Kessler really represents that.
Absolutely. And again, we're continuing to see the development of these young guys, and I have to give all the credit in the world to Will Hardy, because we've seen significant improvements from Walker Kessler. We've seen significant improvements from Isaiah Collier. We've seen improvements from Filipowski. Cody Williams, I feel, is starting to get better. Bryce Ensabaugh last night, 17 points, also had a phenomenal performance, also had a phenomenal night. And so, I think Will Hardy and this coaching staff starting to really build that reputation for themselves where they can develop this young talent. And so if you're a young guy, I think the Utah Jazz is exactly where you want to be, man. They're set up for your success. Truly.
Another thing I want to hit on with Walker, and this is something we talked about in the offseason a little bit, but I don't think it can be brought up enough, is how hard it was for Walker to adjust, in his second year. He had a really promising rookie season for the Jazz and in the NBA. Then his second year, everybody knows, he kind of took a step backwards. And people need to understand, like, this past summer was his first full summer in Salt Lake City, because he got traded in the Rudy Gobert deal from Minnesota.
That's right.
And that was like late August or something, right? So then he spends his rookie year here in Salt Lake, and then the offseason in between his first and second years, he's part of the FIBA team for Team USA. So he has basically no downtime in between year one and year two. By the time year two starts, he was saying in postgame how he was basically exhausted. He was worn out. And that was at the beginning of the season, because he basically went, rookie year, FIBA basketball, right into year two. So year two ended, and that was really the first time where Walker Kessler had a break. He had downtime and time to just focus on Walker and spend that here in Salt Lake City. Or maybe he spent it somewhere, I don't know. But regardless, it was clearly beneficial for him to just have a break and kind of reset himself mentally and physically. And we're seeing the fruit of that pay off. And again, I want to highlight that, because Walker was really struggling last year on the court, and then I took it as off the court. He just felt burnt out. And so I really am happy to see that he's having such a great third year.
And I'm right there with you, man. There was concern on my part, and I'm sure that there was concern on fans' parts and other people's parts that Walker Kessler, because of that slump he had last season, he wasn't going to come around good. But I think this year obviously has disproved that. This year he has taken a huge step forward. Happy to see Walker Kessler develop into the player that he's becoming, and hope he can continue to grow here with the Utah Jazz, man. Loved what I've seen from Walker Kessler, leading scorer against the Sacramento Kings in that loss. And then last night, of course, had the dunk to secure the 1-point win for the Utah Jazz.
Yeah, that was just monster dunk. That's what he does, right?
That's what he does.
Jazz schedule the next couple of days. They play the New Orleans Pelicans tomorrow. That's a 6 p.m. tip-off here at home in Salt Lake City. Monday, so they have a Sunday-Monday back-to-back. Monday, they'll host the Pistons at 7, and then they go to Washington to play the Wizards. And then next Friday, they'll be in Toronto against the Raptors. So Pelicans and Wizards, 2 games you need to lose within the next week. I don't care what else. That's it. You need to lose those games.
Yeah, look. As much credit and as much love as we've just given the Jazz this segment, it's
time to lose.
Do not win tomorrow. Whatever you do not win tomorrow. Because if you beat the Pelicans, as far as the tankathon standing goes, you jump the Pelicans and you're out of that top 3 spot. So your chance of getting that number 1 overall pick goes from 14% down to 12.5%, which is not a huge difference, but it's a huge difference.
Well, the other thing is it lowers your floor too. I mean, that pick can fall as far as, what would it be, 8th?
That's true, yes. You can fall even further than having a more secure shot at being top 4 if you're in that top 3 spot. So whatever you do not beat New Orleans tomorrow.
And so that's the way I kind of look at the draft percentages and the lottery percentages and things like that. Like 14% chance at the number 1 overall pick. Like, yeah, great. Those are pretty small odds, right? What matters more to me, so if you have a top 3 worst record, you have a 52% chance of being in the top 4 picks, right? Kind of weird math there. But, if they're the worst record in the league, the lowest you can fall is 5th. If you're the second worst record, the lowest you can fall is 6th, and so on and so forth.
Right.
So, being where the Jazz are right now, number 3, they can fall to the 7th draft selection. That's the lowest they can fall, or obviously they can go as high as 1. So, that's where I start to worry as far as winning more games, because the more games you win, the farther your pick can fall down in the lottery. But, you know that if you're a top 3 record, you can't get any lower than 7th, any worse than 7th.
Right. And I think that's something that you have to take into consideration when you play a team like New Orleans tomorrow, like when you play the Washington Wizards on Wednesday. There's a couple games here down the stretch that you have an opportunity to help yourself in the draft standings. Of course, tomorrow, a big one against New Orleans. Just make sure you don't win that one. Play well, play good, play as you have been. But let's stay in the top 3 and continue to improve the chances at that number 1 overall and even at a top 4 pick.
Zion Williamson did not play last night for the Pelicans against the Suns. He was held out for rest. So obviously, if you're the Jazz, you're hoping that he shows up tomorrow because he is their best player and would give the Pelicans a better chance to win that game. So if we figure that out during the show today, we will obviously let you know. I doubt we'll have any news on that because the game's not until tomorrow. But that is something to keep an eye on. So we will see. Alex, let's hit a break here. And then coming up next on the other side, we'll talk college basketball. Big news at the beginning of the week. Utah fired head coach Craig Smith. We'll talk a little bit about that coaching search and then some of the action that we have going on later today. Stay tuned. This is the Saturday Show, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
This is DJ and PK.
Jeff Judkins, former Ute player, former Ute assistant coach. If you're talking to any of these guys, would you recommend that they stay? Why would any of the guys give up a good thing they have going for the uncertainty that you're painting in the college basketball industry?
Because you love the University of Utah, and you love the challenge to see if you can return this program where it was. The hard part of the university job is not just getting the job and recruiting, it's winning, it's getting the fans back, it's getting Utah back on the map where they need to, it's dealing with the NIL money. That's tough to do. Once you have it, it's kind of easy. Once you have it, it's hard to lose it. There, when I was coaching, we were ranked in the top 10 for 8 or 9 straight years. If you walk in a gym, people knew who you were. Now you got to start all over and try to get that, which I know it can be done.
Catch DJ and PK mornings from 6 to 10 on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
Welcome back to the Saturday Show, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. I'm Christian Esparza, Alex Napoles with me. Thanks for making us a part of your Saturday morning. Hope you've got good weekend plans. You got anything big this weekend, Alex? Besides, you said you're going to RSL later.
Yeah. I'll be at the game later today, but other than that, I don't really have much going on.
That's nice, though, that it's an early afternoon game. I mean, for the most part, you'll have your night off, right?
You know what, man? And that's how I know I'm getting old. Because
you don't care.
I'm excited that the game is at 2:30. I am so happy it's not a 7:30 kick. Because usually 7:30 kicks, like, you have to hang around for the post-game press conference. You have to hang around, to do some other stuff. And so, like, typically with a 7:30 kick, I don't leave the stadium until like midnight. And by then I'm just ready for bed. And so the fact that I get to go to this game at 2:30 and then hopefully be home by like 6 o'clock, and then I get to hang out. And that's how I know I'm getting old. Because 6 o'clock in bed sounds phenomenal on a Saturday.
6? That's a little early for me, buddy.
Oh, man. I could feel it in my back, bro. I got yesterday, I felt like I got hit by a freight train, man. That's how tired I was.
Long week,
but a good week. We'll say that.
Let's talk college basketball, Alex. Not that I don't care about you going to bed at 6. No, I'm just kidding. Let's talk basketball, though. It was an important week here locally because obviously Utah fired Craig Smith. Not only was he the head coach at the University of Utah, but he coached Utah State before that. So he has been coaching here locally for quite some time now. And I don't think anybody was surprised that Craig Smith was fired. I think the surprise came with the fact that he was fired with 4 games left in the season. After about a week to think about it, have you come across an answer as to why?
I think the only thing that makes sense is, at this point, yes, you have an opportunity to maybe make some noise in the Big 12 tournament, but after that loss to UCF, your chances of making it to the NCAA tournament, to March Madness, that's very slim to none. And so I think as far as the timing goes, it's good to do it with the idea of we can start planning for next season ahead of time, right? I hope that they still put some effort, some fight into going into that Big 12 tournament. But when that NCAA tournament's off the table, it's a good idea to start shifting gears and start looking ahead to what's next.
Leading candidate to replace him, of course, is Alex Jensen. That's the name that has come up from everybody, and I've listened to everybody that we had on the station throughout the week. Everybody was saying Alex Jensen. So, obviously that makes me think, that plus the timing, because Alex Jensen is not a college coach right now. He is an assistant coach with the Dallas Mavericks.
That's right.
Theoretically, if he wanted to, he could accept the job today if that was finalized. So, that plus everybody pointing to Alex Jensen saying that he would be the best guy leads me to believe that, there's probably, where there's smoke, there's fire, right?
I would agree with that. So,
to me, as far as the timing, that's what makes sense to me. You're going to go after an NBA guy. It is funny just looking at it. I have no dog in the fight. I'm looking at it from an outside perspective. But it would be really funny if BYU makes this big splash hire, hires a really high up assistant coach in the NBA, and then the next season Utah does the same thing. But sports are a copycat league. BYU, half their football team assistant coaches played or coached at Utah, right? So it's just funny how the world works.
And obviously, this is just coming from, our own inferences, our own ideas. But I mean, if you're the Utah basketball program and you see BYU hire Kevin Young, and you see BYU get AJ DeBonsa, and you see BYU get all these top recruits because they talk about their head coach having NBA experience, why not?
The one difference is, though, obviously we know Utah does not have the money that BYU has, and they probably won't ever. I don't know, but at least not right now in the short term. But you're right, at least having, people talk all the time about some of the players that Kevin Young worked with when he was with Phoenix and with the 76ers, right? Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, Chris Paul, Joel Embiid. So how much does that say to a recruit when Kevin Young can be like, yeah, let me FaceTime these guys and they can vouch for me? Theoretically,
that very well probably played a big part into why the decision was made.
Right. So then theoretically, if Alex Jensen is the guy, well, who did he work with? Hey, you've heard of Donovan Mitchell, right? Hey, Luka Doncic, right? Like, Alex Jensen has worked with some pretty big names as well. He also coached under Rick Majerus and played for the Utes. So, I mean, that's why I think a lot of people are saying he just fits, is because he is a Ute. And theoretically, it all sounds good. Hopefully, he can coach. I think that's what it boils down to. Hopefully he can coach.
Absolutely.
Hopefully he can make the most out of having limited resources, because that is going to be the hardest part of his job at the University of Utah. I think that could be part of why Craig Smith didn't work out. That's what a lot of people are saying online, is that maybe Craig Smith never had a fair shake. Who knows? They did have NBA talent on his teams there. I know that much, but I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, but in the short term, obviously there's still time for the new guy to come in and make significant changes. But in the short term, it always feels like Utah's just a little bit behind in recruiting, just a little bit behind in, NIL and a couple of other things when you come to compare to the other Big 12 schools. And I want to give all the credit in the world to Craig Smith for being able to do what he's done, right? This is a team that was picked bottom of the Big 12 coming into the basketball season. They were projected and picked to be the preseason last team. They were picked 16th. And they've been able to defy those expectations. But in the long term, there's a lot of work that needs to be done to that basketball program in order for it to be a true contender in the Big 12. Because there's just so much talent, and there's so much blue blood basketball programs.
Big 12 is one of the best basketball conferences in the country.
Absolutely.
We're talking probably the second best basketball league behind the SEC right now.
And so I think in order for Utah to, evolve, it's the right move to make. It's the right move to start a new era, start a new page in your book, and start fresh and begin planning towards being more competitive in the Big 12.
I'm with you. Yeah, they needed a change, and that's what it boils down to.
It's just time for a fresh start.
And the other thing, too, it sounded like a lot of donors were not willing to, donate.
Right.
While Craig Smith was there, and I don't know what came first, the chicken or the egg, but from what we're hearing, especially, again, if a guy like Alex Jensen is the hire, sounds like that's going to excite some people and open up some wallets.
I think Alex Jensen could be and would be a good candidate for Utah, again, just because of, obviously, former player, obviously has a lot of that NBA experience that we're talking about, like with a Kevin Young. I think Alex Jensen is the perfect candidate for Utah.
Utah played Wednesday, just a couple days after firing Craig Smith. They lost to number 22 Arizona, 83-66. Utah will play today at home against Arizona State. That game is coming up at 5. Other local games today, Alex. Let's start with BYU. BYU, they're locks for the NCAA tournament.
They're in.
They are in. So great job by them in Kevin Young's first year, especially after things kind of got off to a rocky start.
It was
in
a
conference
rough start.
play. There were a lot of doubts about whether Kevin Young was really that guy, but they found their footing and they never looked back. And to be locks in the NCAA, and they've been locks for about a week now, so a month remaining, essentially, and have that locked up. Huge accomplishment for BYU.
Huge accomplishment, and like you mentioned, there was a little bit of worries at the beginning of the season in general, right? That loss to Providence was a little bit alarming. Some of the early hiccups they had in conference play were a little bit alarming, but all the credit in the world to Kevin Young, all the credit in the world to the young guys for stepping up, right? Yegor Demon looks a lot better than he did to start the season. Richie Saunders has been absolutely. He's been a revelation for this basketball team. Happy to see BYU figure it out. And I think JJ said it best. This is a young team who needed to figure it out. It was going to take a little bit of time to figure it out. Now that they have 5-game win streak heading into West Virginia, or hosting West Virginia, I should say, and then being in a position where you're going to the tournament. So now it's how strong can you finish in Big 12 play? How deep can you make it in that Big 12 tournament? And of course, how well can you perform at the NCAA tournament? Because last year, if you remember, it was not a good showing.
Yeah, they didn't win a game.
They were one and done against Duquesne.
So yeah, how many games can you win this March? That's where eyes are on as far as BYU. They did crack the AP poll, which was nice. They came in at number 25 to begin the week. They're probably going to rise depending on how today's game goes. But number 25, BYU, they host West Virginia tonight at 8, late tip-off for the Cougs.
And before we get into Utah State, have you taken a gander? Have you looked at the bracketologies and the brackets yet?
I've seen a couple.
I know it's early.
You're saying, let me guess, you're saying you've seen a few projecting Aggies and Cougars?
Oh, yeah, baby.
That would be awesome.
Oh, yeah.
But I don't know. I've seen some, I wouldn't want them to meet in the first round, right? I want them to meet in round 2.
I agree. Mostly because I think it would be absolutely phenomenal for Utah State and BYU to both advance. A second-round matchup would be incredible between the two, but I do at some point hope that Utah State and BYU
that would be
meet.
so exciting.
It'd be so fun,
yeah.
man. It'd be amazing for us here who cover both of these teams to see this matchup. I think a lot of the people around the state, specifically Utah State and BYU fans, would absolutely love the matchup. Right now, in a lot of the brackets, BYU is projected an 8th seed, and they would be facing Utah State in that first round.
Who do you think Utah fans would go for in that matchup? Or do you think they wouldn't watch?
I think Utah fans might not watch.
You don't think they would hate watch? Utah fans are sick people.
No. They would watch.
They are the type to hate watch.
They would watch, but I don't think they would publicly go out with. No, actually, you know what? They would go Utah State.
You think so?
I think they would go Utah State.
Why is that? Just because they hate BYU that much?
Just because it's BYU. Yeah.
I need it.
I do too, man. As soon as I saw, like I said, I know it's early, but as soon as I saw all these brackets coming out projecting BYU and Utah State to go head-to-head, I was like, yes, give me that. Give it to me. Because that would be so incredible. Lenardi has them on their ESPN bracket going up against Utah State. Jerry Palm has them on the CBS Sports bracket going up against Utah State. Couple of them have New Mexico, the Lobos, and I believe there's a few with Vanderbilt and Gonzaga. Those ones don't excite me as much as a BYU Utah State. Truly.
That would be huge. Yeah. We'll see. Speaking of Utah State, they play they play in the afternoon today. They are at Colorado State. At 2, Utah State coming off an ugly loss against Boise State on Wednesday, and that was really unfortunate, Alex, because New Mexico, obviously, they lead the Mountain West. They lost last weekend, so if Utah State could have won out after that, they would have, at the very least, shared the Mountain West Conference title. But since they lost to Boise State, the Aggies are still a game behind the Lobos. So they need some more help. But the Lobos, they've kind of been sliding. I think they've lost a few here in the last month.
The Lobos are on a 2-game losing streak, man.
Yeah, that's, I don't know, because at times they have looked like the best team in the Mountain West, but 2 losses in a row is really, really out of style for them.
No, I 100% agree. And, Christian, we talked about it a little bit last week where, the best thing for Utah State to do was to give yourself a shot by winning out. And it's so unfortunate because New Mexico gave you the shot. You
needed help and you got it. And
you
then
got
blew
the
it
help
on
that
Wednesday.
you needed,
Yep.
and you just couldn't get the win at Boise State. And it was
They lost 82-65. It was, not as close as you would hope that it would be. So I don't know what went on. But the Aggies are in the middle of a tough stretch too. Like that's the other hard part is they're going San Diego State, Boise State, and then today Colorado State, and then they finish up next week at home against Air Force. But 3 tough games in a row as far as San Diego State, Boise State, Colorado State. So hopefully the Aggies bounce back today with a win. If they lose, Colorado State might jump them in the standings. I'm not sure how that would work.
I think so. They're a game behind, and so they would be tied on record, but it's still you're still putting yourself in a position where even if New Mexico loses, you'd probably be out of the race.
Yeah.
I think, obviously, if New Mexico continues that losing streak and Utah State is able to get the win against Colorado State, maybe we're having a different conversation. Maybe we're having a different discussion about Utah State potentially sharing or maybe even winning out that Mountain West Conference title. But it's, like we said last week, it's going to be a hard mountain to climb. All Utah State can do is control what you can control and win those games.
New Mexico, meanwhile, for those keeping an eye on them, they play at home against Air Force today, so I would be absolutely shocked if they lost that game. Air Force sucks really bad. Then New Mexico heads to Nevada. That's always a tough place to play, and then they host UNLV.
Those aren't easy games by any means.
No, they could sneak up on you, but New Mexico should win all 3 of those. But Nevada and UNLV, you got to be on your toes against those guys. So
agreed, 100% agreed. And if Utah State again just needs to go out tonight, Colorado State bounce back and get a dub.
Again, Utah State versus Colorado State, 2 p.m. tip-off today. Pregame is at 1:30. As always, you can catch that here on the Zone. We'll be putting that on the 1280 signal. That's coming up later today. Let's take a break. Coming up next, let's hit technical fouls, Alex, one of our favorite segments of the week. We've got a fellow media member who is giving up on their dream. We'll get to that next. This is the Saturday Show 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
Accessing.
This is Hans Olsen and Scotty G.
Logan Cooley kind enough to join us last year. You guys were kind of on the cusp of the playoffs, and then the news started to break. Will you or won't you move? What's going on? And you could tell that may have been a bit of a distraction in the locker room. Having all of that settled and just focusing on hockey, going out there in front of a great fan base, knowing where you're settled in at, how much has that helped keep this team focused this year?
I think the main part, like you said, is just the fans, the support we've had all season. For me, I think every game has been sold out, if not, close to being sold out. So it's been awesome this year. I've loved living here, loved everything about it, and to just be able to focus on hockey, focus on the team, and kind of what we need to do to just focus on winning and, trying to get into the playoffs. So it's been unbelievable. It's been an awesome year, and, obviously making the playoffs would just top it off.
Catch Hans and Scotty weekdays from noon to 3 on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
Welcome back to the Saturday Show 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. I feel horrible, Alex. I forgot our technical fouls rejoined.
I know, man. I heard the music start to play, and while it is a good song, it just doesn't feel right, man.
Sorry.
It doesn't feel right.
That's on me.
We got to fire it off, man.
All right, here we go.
Fire it off.
If you're coming from the street with dirty shoes on your feet. That's a technical foul. If you switch the radio to some modern music show, that's a technical foul. If you touch the thermostat,
You'll get hit with a bat.
'cause that's a technical foul.
You will feel my wrath.
That's a technical foul.
Personal foul, 69, offense. He was giving them the business.
A technical foul.
Much better.
Technical foul, the first one of the day, it has to go to Christian Esparza for missing the rejoin, man.
Oh, I messed up the beginning of the show. I messed up the rejoin.
That's all right.
I haven't produced this show in years. Just kidding. It hasn't been that long.
That's
yeah,
the first one.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
I'll take it.
All right.
I'll own it. So at the end of last segment, is that the only one you have, or do you have more?
I got a couple more.
Okay. Do you want to go again, or should I go?
No, but you know what? I'll take another swing at it.
All right.
Did you see Hard Knocks?
Oh, yeah.
So,
That's hilarious.
technical foul to the NFL and their teams because everybody in the NFL recognized that the New York Giants front office, their GM, their owner, and everybody involved in the FO, they became kind of a joke on social media because of their Hard Knocks from last season with the Saquon comments, with the Saquon issue, with the GM asking his kids who he should pick for the number 1 overall pick or draft in the draft last year, my bad. And so the NFL was like, I don't know if we want that kind of scrutiny. I don't know if we want that kind of pushback on social media if we do Hard Knocks. So nobody wanted to do Hard Knocks.
So last year was the first edition of the Hard Knocks off season.
Right.
Right. So it's not the regular Hard Knocks that's a training camp. It's the off season, which I tuned in. I loved it because I really like the behind the scenes stuff.
Absolutely.
With the draft and free agency and the general managers and everything that they go through during the off season.
Absolutely.
So you're right. Last year was the first year that HBO did it, and they chose the Giants for some reason, and they caught on camera Joe Shane, I believe his name is. He's the general manager of the Giants. He was having a conversation with the owner, talking about, I don't think, we're paying Daniel Jones all of this money. We can't really afford Saquon Barkley as well. The owner says to his face, I won't be able to sleep at night if he goes to Philadelphia and has a good year.
Right. And that's become a
And
meme.
what happened, Alex?
It's become a meme.
It's become a meme.
Because they won the Super Bowl. And so none of the NFL teams want that kind of scrutiny. So Hard Knocks has elected to follow Bill Belichick and North Carolina for Hard Knocks offseason this year.
That's funny because, it's just going to be spring ball, I guess, for North Carolina. Like, who cares?
Right. Spring ball, maybe, some recruiting in there. But Bill Belichick, who never did Hard Knocks in the NFL, now has decided to invite Hard Knocks into his first ever year.
That's an interesting
as
change.
head coach of North Carolina.
It's like the old guy who, he was a tough son of a gun, and that's what everybody knew him for. And then he retires, and then he's just living life, and he's a completely different person. He's so happy now. So Bill Belichick and his 24-year-old girlfriend are living life at North Carolina. What's funny about that, though, is because the transfer portal, I wonder if Hard Knocks will capture some of that, losing players at the transfer portal. But I don't really like that because the spring transfer portal opens and North Carolina is probably going to lose a lot of players. So why would you care about who they're showing during Hard Knocks when half of those guys aren't going to be on the regular roster?
True.
Well, the NFL Hard Knocks, you watch them lose players, but they don't lose nearly as many. And you actually know who these guys are. Like, who Saquon Barkley is.
Absolutely.
So you care.
Absolutely. I'm very curious and very interested to see how they... One, because, there's so much going on behind the scenes in college football because of the craziness that is now this transfer portal, the craziness that is NIL. Obviously, Bill Belichick taking a job as a college football head coach. Curious to see how Hard Knocks does with Bill Belichick and UNC.
I'm not going to watch it. I doubt anybody will. My guess is next year, 2026, there's not going to be an off-season Hard Knocks.
Maybe.
That's my guess.
We'll see. What do you got, Christian?
So last segment, I teased it a little bit. This is a tough job, being a sports media member. You know, not a lot of glory sometimes. So it's understandable when people want to step away. And, we've got somebody in our field that is unplugging the mic, hanging up the headphones.
You hate to see it.
Paul George. Paul George has decided that he can no longer do his Podcast P, because the 76ers are amidst a 9-game losing streak. They just shut down Joel Embiid for the remainder of the season. He might miss a big chunk of next year depending on how things go, if he has to have surgery and things like that. So Paul George has decided, it's best for him to focus on being a basketball player.
You know what? Good on him.
Yeah, good on him.
Good on him. I mean, if you're the Philadelphia 76ers, I'd be a little bit upset about this whole situation.
Which part?
The fact that you invested so much into Paul George, thinking that him and Joel Embiid were going to bring you a ship, and Paul George has cared more about his podcast than actually playing this season. And, of course, the Joel Embiid situation, while unfortunate, probably should have been handled better. But they're between a rock and a hard place because this team was built to, bring you some championships, and instead you're one of the worst teams in the Eastern Conference.
Paul George is averaging 16.4 points per game on 43% shooting. Not what you would expect from, he's a big name, right? And he was the biggest free agent in last year's class.
But he's getting older.
But he's old.
He's getting older.
And as you said, he cared more about putting out YouTube clips than actually being on the court. Meanwhile, Philadelphia, 12th seed in the East, 20-38 on the season. As I mentioned, they are on a 9-game losing streak. Joel Embiid has not been himself this year, and they just shut him down for the rest of the season. So I really just basically wanted to point and laugh at Paul George, being like, I
love that he made it a big deal. Like, he was like, I'm stepping away from
this.
him.
Is it. I decided to focus on bringing my team a championship. Well, yeah, that's out of the picture, buddy.
You get paid to play basketball, not to make your YouTube
It's funny
clips.
Because I think it can be insightful when athletes have podcasts,
Sure.
right? And there is a time for it, but to have that be something that you continue throughout the season and as often as Paul George does it, I don't think that's beneficial at all. And as you're saying, I think what you're kind of alluding to, you should be working your butt off to be one of the best players in the world. And at one point, Paul George was a very, very good NBA player, right? And I don't think it's a coincidence that, I tried to do some homework on his stats since he started his podcast. He actually had one really good year when he was doing his podcast. But that's not the case this year.
Definitely not the case.
So I'll stand on that.
Definitely not the case. And, we'll miss Podcast P. I don't know if we will.
I won't. But yeah, I just think it's funny, you're on a 9-game losing streak and you hop on YouTube to talk about other players in the NBA. Like, who's that helping?
If I'm a 76ers fan, it leaves a bad taste in my mouth.
Well, and it's hard because you see the success of Travis Kelce and Jason Kelce's podcast, right? One of the most listened to sports podcasts in the world, if not the most. I'm not sure who's on top right now, but regardless, very successful. And people like them. And at the same time, I don't know, maybe it's a little different because in the NFL you only play once a week, right?
And absolutely. And whereas in the NBA you're playing
3-4 times a week.
Sometimes 4 times a week, yeah, man. It seems, I don't know, it just seems like with how much you're playing, with how much you're traveling, and with how much he was putting out, it just always seemed like Paul George was prioritizing being that YouTube guy rather than producing.
And the way that producing, the way that he announced it, he made it sound like it's such a groundbreaking thing, like he's making such a sacrifice. Like, yep, not doing the podcast anymore. All right, Paul.
We'll miss you.
Michael Jordan didn't have a podcast.
Was podcasting a thing back then?
No.
Yeah.
Kobe Bryant didn't have a podcast.
No.
LeBron James doesn't have a podcast for, as weird as he is.
That's
I guess he does guest. He did guest appearances with his coach, JJ Redick. But since JJ took the job, they don't do the podcast anymore.
That's true.
My point exactly.
That's true. That's a good point.
All right, Alex, let's take another break. Coming up next on the other side, it's Combine Weekend in Indianapolis. We've had a lot of drama. Got to talk about, you know what? While we're on it, technical foul to Jordan Schultz. We can't leave this segment without talking about that. Jordan Schultz, son of Howard Schultz, the founder of Starbucks, the owner of Starbucks. Jordan is an NFL insider. He allegedly got into an altercation with Ian Rappaport, the biggest NFL insider, at a Starbucks.
The word that was being used was accosted.
Never heard that word in my life.
And
he accosted Ian Rappaport.
And when you accost someone, it sounds pretty serious.
Yeah. Apparently just went up to him and yelled at him for... Long story short, Jordan Schultz tweeted that Matthew Stafford and Tom Brady met at a ski resort to talk about Matt Stafford going to Las Vegas to the Raiders. And then Ian Rappaport came out and kind of refuted that report and said, it wasn't a planned meeting. It was a chance meeting. They just happened to bump into each other. Like, okay.
The fact that this all happened, though, at the JW Marriott Starbucks in front of everybody to see is just amazing. And I'm disappointed that we're in an era with cell phones and nobody
caught that.
Nobody recorded it.
Home field advantage for Jordan Schultz there inside of the Starbucks. That's kind of unfair.
And it's funny because, Rappaport literally the next day goes on Pat McAfee and basically is like, hey, this
Dunkin' Donuts, they've got some real good coffee.
Yeah. And he's like, basically, this guy sucks. I thought that was amazing.
Yeah. Hilarious situation in Indianapolis. But yeah, Combine coming up next. We'll talk that and some NFL rumors because outside of all the people running around in underwear and the random stats that you get, you also start to hear some steam from free agency and things like that. Things are starting to pick up there. So we'll talk that next. This is the Saturday Show, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.